Nicolae Ceausescu was born on January 26, 1918, in the small town of Scornișești in southern Romania. His birth occurred during World War I, near the border with Bulgaria, a nation allied with Romania's enemies at the time. The political climate was tense, with Romania negotiating peace while surrounded by hostile forces. Nicolae came from a modest background. His father, Andruda Ceausescu, was a sheep farmer and a supporter of the Peasants' Party, an agrarian socialist movement. Although Nicolae inherited some of his father's political views, their relationship was strained due to his father's struggles with alcoholism and violence. Nicolae's mother, Alexandrina Militaru, came from a humble family with ties to Romanian revolutionary forces that had fought for independence from Ottoman rule in the 1800s. Nicolae was the third child in a family of 9 children. His early years were marked by family struggles and a challenging home life. Despite these hardships, his childhood experiences shaped his political interests and ambitions. His upbringing in a politically active yet troubled family would later influence his actions and decisions as a leader. Nicolae Ceausescu's family background played a significant role in shaping his early life and later decisions. His father, Andruda Ceausescu, was a sheep farmer who strongly supported the Peasants' Party, an agrarian socialist movement. This political environment influenced Nicolae during his youth, though his relationship with his father was far from ideal. Andruda struggled with alcoholism and was reportedly abusive towards his wife and children, creating a tense and troubled home environment. Nicolae's mother, Alexandrina Militaru, came from a humble background as well. Her family had a proud history of involvement in Romanian independence movements during the 1900s, striving to free the country from Ottoman rule. Alexandrina's resilience and family values deeply influenced Nicolae and offered him some stability during his difficult childhood. The Ceausescu household was large, with 9 children in total. Nicolae was the third child, with 2 older sisters, Nicolina and Marin. Over time, the family grew to include 6 more siblings, creating a bustling, crowded home. This challenging environment, coupled with the hardships of life in rural Romania, taught Nicolae the realities of struggle and survival from a young age. These early experiences, while difficult, played a foundational role in shaping his personality and political ideology. Nicolae's exposure to political discussions at home and his determination to escape his family struggles would eventually lead him to pursue a different path. Nicolae Ceausescu grew up during a time of significant political and social change in Romania. The early 1900s saw Romania transition from being under Ottoman influence to becoming a fully independent kingdom. By the late 1870s, Romania had invited a German prince, Carol, to become King Carol I, ushering in an era of monarchy that continued into the 20th century. During Nicolae's youth, Romania experienced mixed fortunes. After World War I, the country regained lost territories through the Treaty of Trianon in 1920, expanding its borders significantly. However, these successes came with challenges. Ethnic tensions persisted, especially with Hungary, as both countries claimed disputed lands. This created a volatile political atmosphere in the Balkans, where nationalism often led to conflict. When Nicolae was growing up, Romania also faced internal political struggles. King Ferdinand passed away in 1927, leaving the throne to his grandson, Michael, who was only 5 years old. The unstable monarchy and the onset of the Great Depression in 1929 further deepened the country's challenges. King Carol II eventually took over, but his authoritarian rule, coupled with economic hardships, caused discontent. During the 1930s, Romania witnessed the rise of extremist political movements, both on the right and left. King Carol II's regime repressed socialist movements, including the Communist Party. These actions created a dangerous environment for political activists, which would later affect Ceausescu as he began his political journey. This politically charged and unstable environment profoundly influenced Nicolae Ceausescu's formative years. Witnessing these events, he developed a keen interest in politics and began to align himself with ideologies that promised change. Nicolae Ceausescu's political journey began at a young age. In 1929, when he was just 11 years old, he fled his home in Scornicești to escape his abusive father. He moved to Bucharest, where he lived with his older sister Nicolae. In the capital city, Nicolae worked as an apprentice shoemaker for Alexandru Ceausescu, a member of the Romanian Communist Party. This apprenticeship proved to be a turning point in Nicolae's life, as Ceausescu introduced him to communist ideals and encouraged his political involvement. The Romanian Communist Party, founded in 1921, was a small but determined group inspired by the Russian Revolution of 1917. At the time, the party operated in secret because it was banned by the Romanian government. The authorities feared that communists would serve as agents of the Soviet Union, which had its own ambitions in Eastern Europe. Despite the risks, Nicolae joined the party in 1932, becoming an active member by distributing propaganda and participating in protests. As a young activist, Nicolae frequently found himself in trouble with the law. His commitment to the communist cause made him a target of the government's anti-communist policies. By the mid-1930s, he had been arrested multiple times for his involvement in strikes and protests. In 1936, at the age of 18, he was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for his political activities. While imprisonment was harsh, it strengthened Nicolae's dedication to communism. He formed connections with other activists and gained a deeper understanding of revolutionary politics. These experiences laid the foundation for his rise within the Communist Party in the years to come. Nicolae Ceausescu's imprisonment during the 1930s and 1940s was a defining period in his life and political career. After his arrest in 1936 for his involvement in communist activities, he was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. He served most of this time in Dovtona prison, which was infamous for its harsh conditions and its role in detaining political prisoners. Although life in prison was challenging, it provided Nicolae with opportunities to build relationships with prominent members of the Communist Party. In 1943, he was transferred to the Târgu Jiu internment camp, where he shared a cell with Georgiu Dege, a senior figure in the communist movement. Georgiu Dege would later become the leader of Communist Romania, and his mentorship had a profound impact on Nicolae's rise in the party. During these years, Nicolae deepened his understanding of Marxist ideology and revolutionary tactics. His interactions with experienced communists allowed him to establish valuable connections that would serve him well in the future. By the time he was released in 1944, Nicolae had positioned himself as a loyal and committed member of the communist movement, ready to take on greater responsibilities. Nicolae Ceausescu's rise within the Communist Party began shortly after his release from prison in 1944. During the final stages of World War II, Romania transitioned into a communist regime under Soviet influence. Nicolae quickly capitalized on the connections he had established during his imprisonment, particularly his relationship with Georgiu Dege, who became the General Secretary of the Romanian Communist Party. In the years following the war, Nicolae held various positions that helped him gain prominence within the party. In the late 1940s, he was appointed head of the Union of Communist Youth, a group focused on spreading communist ideals among young Romanians. His leadership in this role allowed him to build a strong support base and develop his organizational skills. Nicolae's influence continued to grow as he was elected to the Great National Assembly in 1948, the legislative body of Communist Romania. Although this position had limited power, it marked an important step in his political career. By 1949, he was appointed Deputy Minister of Agriculture, a role that introduced him to key decision-making processes within the government. His loyalty to Gheorghe Dege and his role in supporting the anti-Muscovite faction during party disputes further solidified his position. In 1952, Nicolae became a member of the Central Committee, and by 1954, he was elevated to the Politburo, becoming one of the most powerful figures in Romanian politics. Nicolae Ceausescu played a significant role in shaping Romania's policies on collectivization and industrialization during the late 1940s and 1950s. Collectivization, inspired by similar policies in the Soviet Union, aimed to transform Romania's agricultural sector by consolidating small farms into large, state-run collective farms. The government believed this would boost efficiency, reduce labor needs, and free workers to support industrial growth. As Deputy Minister of Agriculture in 1949, Nicolae was actively involved in planning and implementing these policies. While collectivization promised economic benefits, it faced widespread resistance from peasants who were reluctant to give up their land and livelihoods. The government responded with aggressive measures, including arrests and forced compliance. By the mid-1960s, collectivization was largely complete, but it came at a high cost, including violence, displacement, and social unrest. Nicolae also contributed to Romania's industrialization efforts. During the 1950s, the government prioritized the development of heavy industries, such as steel production, manufacturing, and energy. These initiatives aimed to modernize the economy and reduce Romania's dependence on imports. Nicolae's roles in the Ministry of Agriculture and later the Defense Ministry allowed him to oversee key aspects of this transformation. Although industrial output grew significantly during this period, the rapid pace of change caused challenges, including poor working conditions and environmental degradation. Nicolae's commitment to these policies demonstrated his ambition to modernize Romania, but also revealed the harsh realities of centralized planning. After becoming the leader of Romania in 1965, Nicolae Ceausescu began consolidating his power and establishing himself as the central figure of the nation. Unlike some communist leaders who shared authority with others, Nicolae pursued absolute control. By 1967, he had taken on the role of president of the State Council, solidifying his position as the head of both the party and the government. A defining feature of Nicolae's leadership was the development of a cult of personality. Inspired by other authoritarian leaders, such as Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong, Nicolae sought to project himself as a heroic and visionary figure. Statues of him were erected across the country, and his image appeared on stamps and currency. Romanian schools taught children to revere Nicolae as a genius and savior of the nation. Unusually, Nicolae extended his cult of personality to include his wife, Elena, who was portrayed as an intellectual and a key figure in Romanian politics. Together, they cultivated an image of a strong and united leadership, even as their regime became increasingly oppressive. This focus on personal glorification led to the suppression of dissent and the centralization of power. Nicolae's cult of personality alienated many Romanians, as it prioritized his image over the well-being of the people. This approach would later contribute to the growing discontent that ultimately led to his downfall. Nicolae Ceausescu's leadership was marked by his unique approach to foreign relations, particularly his efforts to distance Romania from the Soviet Union. In 1968, Nicolae made a decisive move by publicly condemning the Soviet-led invasion of Czechoslovakia during the Prague Spring. This speech, delivered to a crowd of 100,000 people in Bucharest, symbolized Romania's break from Soviet control and established Nicolae as an independent voice within the Eastern Bloc. Unlike other Eastern European leaders, Nicolae sought to reduce Romania's dependence on the Soviet Union. He resisted Moscow's economic influence by rejecting proposals like the construction of a railway linking Ukraine to Bulgaria through Romania. His government also denounced the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, further straining relations. To balance Romania's position, Nicolae developed stronger ties with Western nations. In the 1970s, Romania normalized relations with the United States and Western Europe. Nicolae's openness to the West earned him temporary international recognition, and Romania joined the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. These relationships helped secure loans and economic aid for Romania. Additionally, Nicolae fostered alliances with China, which had also distanced itself from Soviet influence. During his state visit to Beijing in 1971, Nicolae aligned himself with Mao Zedong's policies and sought to emulate aspects of China's approach to governance. Despite his successes in diplomacy, Nicolae's balancing act between East and West created tensions at home and abroad. His efforts to maintain independence from the Soviet Union eventually isolated Romania, both within the Eastern Bloc and globally, as his authoritarian regime grew increasingly unpopular. Nicolae Ceausescu's economic policies initially brought growth and modernization to Romania, but eventually led to widespread hardship and discontent. In the 1960s and early 1970s, Romania experienced industrial growth fueled by heavy borrowing from international lenders like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. This period saw significant investments in industries such as manufacturing, energy, and infrastructure, leading to a temporary economic boom. However, by the late 1970s, Romania's economy began to stagnate. The borrowed funds created a massive national debt, which had reached over $10 billion by the early 1980s. In response, Nicolae implemented an aggressive austerity program aimed at repaying the debt as quickly as possible. While this move reduced Romania's financial obligations, it caused severe economic strain for ordinary citizens. Under the austerity measures, the government imposed strict rationing on basic goods such as food, fuel, and electricity. Wages stagnated, while inflation made everyday essentials increasingly expensive. Many families faced shortages of essential items, with meat and other staples becoming rare luxuries. By the mid-1980s, calorie intake was strictly limited and energy consumption was heavily restricted. Nicolae also continued to allocate significant resources to ambitious projects, such as the construction of the Palace of the Parliament, while neglecting investments in critical areas like healthcare and education. These priorities widened the gap between the regime's goals and the needs of the population. Though the national debt was eventually repaid, the cost to Romanian society was immense. The economic hardships caused by Nicolae's policies eroded public support for his regime and contributed significantly to the discontent that fueled the Romanian Revolution. The Romanian Revolution of 1989 marked the dramatic end of Nicolae Ceausescu's regime. The uprising began on December 16, 1989, in the city of Timisoara, where protests erupted over the forced eviction of a Hungarian pastor. These protests quickly grew into broader demonstrations against Ceausescu's authoritarian rule. By December 17, the government had deployed the military to suppress the unrest, resulting in numerous casualties. Despite the crackdown, news of the events in Timisoara spread across the country, fueled by international media. On December 21, Nicolae attempted to address a large crowd in Bucharest to restore confidence in his leadership. However, the speech descended into chaos as the crowd interrupted him with chants of protest. This marked a turning point as demonstrations in Bucharest quickly escalated into widespread rebellion. On December 22, Ceausescu and his wife Elena fled Bucharest by helicopter but were soon captured near Târgoviște. The couple was placed on trial by a military tribunal on December 25, facing charges including genocide and abuse of power. The trial lasted only a few hours, and both were found guilty and executed by firing squad the same day. The Romanian Revolution ended over 4 decades of communist rule. While the uprising led to the establishment of a new government, the abrupt and violent nature of Ceausescu's fall highlighted the deep resentment and suffering experienced by the Romanian people under his leadership. The fall of Nicolae Ceausescu in 1989 marked the beginning of a new era for Romania. The transition from communist rule to democracy brought significant changes, but also presented numerous challenges. In the immediate aftermath of the revolution, Romania faced political instability as the nation worked to rebuild its institutions and establish a democratic government. Ion Iliescu, a former communist official, became the first post-communist president overseeing the transition to democracy. While the new government introduced reforms, the legacy of corruption and inefficiency from the Ceausescu era persisted, hampering progress in key areas such as public services and economic development. Despite these challenges, Romania made notable strides over the following decades. The country became a member of the European Union in 2007, which boosted economic growth and modernized infrastructure. Average annual GDP growth of 5% in the 21st century demonstrated Romania's potential as a developing European nation. However, issues such as political corruption and immigration have remained significant obstacles, with millions of Romanians leaving the country in search of better opportunities. Today, Romania continues to balance its historical legacy with its aspirations for a brighter future. The nation's progress reflects the resilience of its people who overcame decades of hardship to build a democratic society. What do you think about Romania's journey after the fall of Nicolae Ceausescu? Do you see it as a story of resilience or one of ongoing struggle? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content. Thank you very much for watching.